Hey everybody, this is Rich, South Florida Beekeeping with Rich, and this is part two of the talk that I gave down for the Tropical Beekeepers Association in Miami, Florida. This is where things go off the rails. You'll definitely want to watch this one because it gets to be a lot of fun. But if you didn't see part one yet, go back and watch part one. It's linked in the show notes. November 1st, I had 8 frames of comb, 7.5 frames of comb, and 7.5 frames of comb in my 3 hives. And that's both sides. Or I wouldn't call it a half. A half is when I have it on one side and the other side's, nectar or whatever. That's a lot of bees for November 1st. Wouldn't be like that anywhere else in the country. But down here, I just take that as normal. But it's much easier to find the queens in the fall or make queens of your own in the fall than trying to make queens in the spring. Either way, since you have to find your old queen anyway, this is a good opportunity to relieve congestion and equalize hives by taking frames of brood and resources and making a nuke with your old queen. This is called a swarm control split. It's also a way to make more room in the brood nest. When you start finding brood nests being backfilled with nectar and pollen, like I did this week, yesterday morning, then you know swarm cells are not far behind. And this is where we get into my favorite swarm control method, checkerboarding and opening the brood nest. If you have 7 or 8 frames of capped brood in the nest all tight together, you are sending out a very strong swarm impulse signal. Hey, we got plenty of brood here. Let's do a split, all right? We have plenty of resources and we don't have room for more. That's when you want to open the brood nest to make more room. There are 2 rules which must never be violated when opening the brood nest. 2 rules that must never be violated when you're going to open the brood nest. Rule number 1 is you always have at least 2 frames of brood together. Rule number 2, you never put more than 1 frame of empty comb or an empty frame between 2 frames of brood. Never violate those 2 rules. I'll repeat them over and over again. There must always be at least 2 frames of brood touching. That's number 1. And number 2, there must never be more than 1 empty frame between 2 frames of brood. Now, depending upon the time of year, if we are in a strong nectar flow like we're going into right now, go ahead and drop an empty frame in between those 2 frames of brood, or drop an empty frame of foundation in between those 2. There is enough going on now that they can build out that frame if they want to. Later on in the year, when things have slowed down, we're not quite into dearth yet, but we don't have as much nectar coming in as we do now, then you would better be using drawn comb, whether you're using drawn comb on foundation or whether you're using foundationless comb like I do. Later in the year, you should use drawn comb. If you want to use drawn comb now, you can, but you're going to be in there a whole lot sooner rather than later to do the whole thing over again, right? You want to give these bored worker bees, particularly the nurse bees, you want to give them something to do as well as taking care of the brood. But to get back on it, let's give some examples here. If you have 6 frames of comb and you put 2 frames of empty you put 2 empty frames in between those 6 frames, between 3 and 3. In the research they were doing on this, they found that there were occasions, it may not have been often, but there were occasions where the queen was over here. They split that 3 and 3, and queen cells started being made over here. Never put 2 empty frames next to each other. 1 empty frame, never less than 2 frames of brood. You like to do things symmetrically. You've done 2 frames of brood, an empty frame, 2 frames of brood, an empty frame, 2 frames of brood, an empty frame. Oh, there's 1 frame of brood left here. Take that empty frame back out, push that frame of brood back over so you have 2, 2, and 3. Don't have 2, 2, 2, and 1. Okay? Don't violate the rule. Never less than 2 frames of brood. Never more than 1 empty frame between 2 frames of brood. Okay? That's how you open the brood nest. Now, another way to open the brood nest, which is the same way, it's just done vertically instead of horizontally. I just said I had 8 frames of brood. Well, I took everything apart and I rearranged everything. I put 4 frames of brood all touching. I didn't put an empty frame in the middle of that. January, it was the first week in January. I wanted to go off for 3 weeks vacation. I didn't want them doing anything while I was gone. So 8 frames of brood. I took another box and I just started rearranging everything. 4 frames of brood in the middle here, resources on the outside. Boom, another box on top of that. The next 4 frames of brood on top of that, more on the outside. Boom, a third box on top of that with some honey stores in the middle and some checkerboarded frames and honey stores outside of that. Put it back together. I just got around checking that yesterday because I didn't want to check them while it was chilly out the last week or so up there, and I've just come back. Everybody's doing fine. There is a little backfilling going on because the queen did come up into that third box and she laid a bunch out. And most of that is hatched out at this point, and they're putting nectar back in. Am I worried about that? No, that's the third box up right now. They're just going to be using that for honey super. Tomorrow, when this is done, I'm going to go in and do a deep dive, but I'm sure I'm going to find that everything's okay there. And I will have frames of drawn comb, and bing, bang, boom, I'm going to split that brood nest up some more. My goal, of course, is I don't want them to swarm, and I don't want to make increase. I don't want to do splits. I'm supposed to have 3 hives. There are times when I have 11 or 12 hives back there. So I'm glad they don't come unannounced. Those are all other people's swarms that I'm catching for the most part. Not that they aren't occasionally my own. But this is the most important thing I'm going to tell you here tonight. The best way in South Florida that I have found to prevent swarming is to open the brood nest and checkerboard. Open the brood nest, get that broken out that way, and checkerboard your frames of honey with empty frames in between them. I learned that part to start with when I was doing top bar hives, because that's kind of what you're doing there. You take out a frame of honey and you drop in an empty frame. Woo! And off you go, and they just start drawing them in. The techniques that I just described, I learned by way of Michael Bush, the Practical Beekeeper. If you are all unfamiliar with Michael Bush, wonderful man. He is an all 8-frame medium beekeeper up in Pennsylvania, I think it is. But he's written a wonderful book called The Practical Beekeeper that you do not have to buy. If you want to buy it, I bought it. Actually, you can either buy it as 1 volume and it's this thick, or you can buy it as 3 volumes, part 1, part 2, and part 3, which is a lot more easily handled, which is the way I bought them. But you don't have to pay for anything. The entire book is on his website in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and I don't know how many other languages. All free for the asking. You can read it. You don't have to pay a cent. He's also a very, very active contributor to many of the major bee forums. So if there's some question you have and you don't find it on his website and you don't find it on the book, if you go to the forums and type it in, you're likely to get an answer from him there. I find him to be a very practical man, very practical beekeeper. One of the lovely things about all medium beekeeping is, particularly 8-frame medium beekeeping, is that, I need to do splits. And I'll just put you over here. I'll put you over here. Top cover, top cover, top cover. There you go. We got 3 splits. We're going to see what happens. And that's all he did. If one of them didn't make a new queen, put it back with one of the other ones. But it is a really easy way to keep bees. And it's a really easy way to do splits. If it works, and great. If it doesn't work, put them back together. It's wonderful. um, I think the world of him, and the reason I bring this up at this point is that this particular technique he credits to a Mr. Walt Wright from Virginia. He credits him with proving it to him. So I will continue on, and I will give Mr. Wright credit for having done all the experiments to prove how well this works. But you notice my use of the word proving it to him. He didn't teach it to him. He didn't tell him about it. He proved it to him. He showed that it worked in a large series of experiments over several years before he was completely satisfied that if you stick to those two simple rules and you don't violate them, it is one of the most valuable tools you'll ever have for preventing swarming in your hives. Keep that brood nest open. Give those underemployed nurse bees something to do. Keep things cooler. Give the queen room to expand. Of course, they talk about doing that in mid-March. Well, I was doing that at the end of the first week in January because, hey, it's South Florida. If you haven't done anything about swarm control yet in your hives, you better get home and do something about it. Okay, wonderful. That's next. Okay, so what do you do when you find queen cells in the hive? Well, if you want increase, make splits. If you have 3 frames that all have queen cells on them, make splits. If all you have is 5-frame nukes, well, remember those follower boards I was talking about? Because you don't really need to go through, you don't need to strip 5 frames worth of resources out of your hive or out of all your hives. You can make 2-frame splits, 3-frame splits. I have these great little 2-frame boxes that I made some years ago that I keep wanting to get rid of and make something else, but darn it, they're just too darn handy to have around. I made them so that they're about 2 inches deeper than the medium frames that I use. Solid board in them, goes out the back, and a Boardman feeder fits in the back in a precisely cut slot so that there's no access from the outside to the inside back there at the back of the hive. And I have a very small entrance in the front of the hive. The box takes 3 frames. You can use it for 2 frames or you can use it for 3 frames. So you take the frame that has the cells on it. You see what else is on there. Is it mostly cat brood? Is it mostly resources? Is it mostly nectar? What is it? You put it in, and knowing what you see from there, you're going to grab more resources, more food. You're going to shake a whole bunch of bees into there. You're going to grab 2 or 3 more frames, and you're going to shake the bees in there. The forager force will fly up. They'll go back to the hive. The nurse bees will stay there. You close the whole thing up. You give it some sugar water, and you wait for them to hatch out. Yeah, if there's 5 queen cells on that frame, one's going to live. 2 enter, 1 leaves. It's Mad Max all over again. But you're going to get a strong, healthy queen. Hopefully she goes out, she gets mated, she comes back. Bing, bang, boom. You've just made increase. That moves on into a 5-frame nuke flawlessly and off from there. Simplest thing to do. If you're a foundationalist beekeeper like me, well, you got a sharp knife, you can cut some of those capped queen cells out and you can continue splitting other things with them. They love a capped queen cell. You can take a couple of shakes and put some resources in, squish that queen cell up onto something, and away you go again. You can make a lot of increase if you want. It's the easiest way. Okay, what do you do when you find queen cells in the hive? The simple reality is that they're capped. Your hive is probably already swarmed. They're capped. Likely she's already gone, but you're not noticing it at the front entrance. The other, on what's number 3 swarm in November? Yeah, November 26th of last year, I was going in to do the splitting. I had done hive number 1 the day before. Had my back to hive number 2. I was working on hive number 3. Had just finished doing it all to hive number 3. Just finished buttoning it up. I was picking up my tools. I'm watching the front entrance. The bees are chill. You wouldn't think I had just ripped their whole world apart. They were just chill. I'm like, you're such good girls. why am I in a, holy crap. Hive number 2, which hadn't gotten hit yet, it was going to get done tomorrow. It was in full swarm mode. I'm just standing there in a ball of bees. Who hasn't been in the middle of a swarm yet? Oh, you have so much to look forward to. There is no cooler thing than to be standing in the middle of a swarm. They are so cool. But anyway, that one happily just flew up to the cedar tree. I just got the bucket, popped it in, boop, popped it into a nuke, and away we went. That was easy. But the simplest, if you want to deny reality and you want to think, no, there's capped queen cells, but they haven't swarmed yet. Look, there's so much activity at the front entrance. Well, a swarm down here leaves, and I can't tell the difference the next day. Well, for the most part, until the queen cells start hatching, and if the new queen doesn't kill all of her rivals and they allow secondary and tertiary swarms to go out, then you're starting to start going, what happened to my hive? But down here, for the most part, if one swarm leaves, you'll hardly notice the difference. And in terms of honey production, if you're still in the middle of a flow, you probably still have plenty of bees from the ones that are still left and actively foraging today and the ones that are going to hatch out tomorrow, so that the ones who were in there yesterday are coming out to join the workforce today. We don't usually have 6-week flows down here, and you're not going to come up against that wall, the brood break, for 21 days, right? You're going to have several weeks of good nectar flow coming in to make honey. There may not be enough bees to process it all into finished honey, but you'll be getting some heavy nectar anyway. But okay, we're just going to assume that you actually believe you have a queen. Well, go in there and find her. If you go in there and find her, you take her and the frame she's on, you put it in a nuke, you take 2 frames of food, you take 2 frames of resources, that means open nectar and pollen and such, you pop all that in there, you take several frames, and by several, maybe 3 or 4, and you shake in there. The nurse bees fall into it, the forager bees fly out, shake, boom, boom, boom. You've just done a swarm split.
Are you a 2-shaker or a 3-shaker?
3.
Boom, boom, boom.
I'm a 3-shaker, definitely. So you've gotten rid of a whole bunch of nurse bees, and it was those underemployed nurse bees that were causing the problem, that was stimulating the hive to swarm. It was like, hey, we need something to do here. When a swarm happens, there is a disproportionate amount of 12 to 15 day old bees in the swarm. Hey, I didn't count them, but the people who know these things tell us that a swarm leaves with a disproportionate amount of 12 to 15 day old bees. What's important about that? Because that's when they're at the peak of their wax production period. That's when they're most able to produce wax, a lot of wax in a hurry.
The younger bees produce more.
Younger bees are working. The bees younger than 12 days, they're feeding, they're cleaning, they're taking out the dead, they're receiving the nectar and putting it in cells, they're receiving pollen and mixing it with enzymes and doing this other things, different things at different times. But it's when you get to that 12 to 15 day period, that 3-day period there, that the nurse bees are in maximum production mode for wax. If you have nothing but old foragers, somehow or other, everything got disappeared, they can be made to go back and do some of that work. But the simple fact of the matter is, what you want to keep in mind is, it's the nurse bees, and particularly the 12 to 15 day old ones, that are really important to the swarm, because they've got to get that wax made. So you want to make sure there's plenty of nurse bees. That gets the nurse bees out of the hive, that gets some resources out of the hive, that opens things up, and you can be good to go there. But then if you're going to do that, of course, the next thing you do is you're going to be shaking a lot more bees than that, because you want to make sure you take everything every queen cell out of that hive except for the 2 best. Wait a minute, I read it was you only leave 1. Well, gee, golly gosh, as far as I'm concerned, that's putting all your eggs in one basket. Leave 2. You never know when you might injure one of those. That if you leave 1 and you're putting it back in, you could injure it and not know it. Leave 2. If 1 comes out, she'll kill the other one. You'll be good either way, but leave 2. Never leave 1. Don't leave 3 because you don't want to give them an opportunity to keep the queen away from the other one and have a secondary swarm or a tertiary swarm. That's the best way to kill a hive, is to let them just keep bleeding out till they just can't do it anymore. Yeah.
I was reading that
Nutrition.
high levels of nutrition are essential for those nurse bees to have developed. What is it, the pharyngeal gland that produces the wax and royal jelly. So,
Well, the pharyngeal gland doesn't make the wax. That's done back here, but the royal jelly, okay.
the point though is really that, do you do anything extra to provide nutrition?
Bananas.
So they get a big boost. Bananas, he said.
Bananas. You're not watching my videos, people. Watch my videos. No, literally. You want to know that story? There was a woman that was in Africa. And in Africa, apparently, everybody feeds bananas to their bees because they know it's good nutrition and they produce more brood. It is known. If you feed bananas to your bees, you get more brood, like could be 15% more brood, okay? So she comes back to the United States. She's not in sub-Saharan Africa. She's up like in Minnesota, where some places really cold that I've never been, okay? And she's not in a doctoral program or anything like that. She's in a master beekeeper program. And she's at the point in the master beekeeper program where she has to do her thesis. And she tells her instructors, who are college professors, that she wants to do it on researching the nutritional value of bananas for bees based on what she saw in Africa. And they turned her down. And she refused to be turned down. She argued it and argued it and argued it, and they finally said, you go ahead and do it. But if you don't knock our socks off, you fail. Well, she did it. She not only knocked their socks off, they said, never has anyone taught us something we just didn't know before. Bananas for your bees. Okay? It's really that simple. And in fact, you'll see a video come out here in a few weeks. Just out of curiosity, I had a surplus of oranges the other day, and I sliced up some orange and put in there. Hey, they wiped those oranges out in 2 days. So what you do with bananas is, when they're in the right stage of ripeness, when they're just speckled, when they're perfect, slice them down the middle, slice them in half this way. You put them on the top bars, and you mash everything down. I am in the act of, yeah.
So you're saying you never buy any pollen substitute out of this other?
Only when I'm dealing with a young swarm or a sick hive or something like that. I do make pollen patty up using a pollen substitute, some sugar, water, and ground up real pollen and such.
You can't get bananas. I guess you can't get bananas.
Yes, you can. You live in South Florida. Can you? You can find a banana tree year round. If you only have 6 in your backyard, no, you got to go to the store and buy a few. But hey, on the way here, I drove by at least a 6-acre banana plantation. So yeah, you can give bananas here year round if you wanted to. Why would you need to do it year round? Okay, it's like the 3 sisters. Okay, you've got your corn, your squash, and your beans. If you eat all 3 of them together, you have every protein needed for the human body. Not if you just eat beans, not if you just eat corn, and not if you just eat squash. But if you eat all 3 of them, you get all of the proteins needed for a complete diet. And most of the time down here, we have enough different proteins. Yes, we don't have safflower fields down here. You know, there's people where there's safflower fields. Makes a great light honey, but it's terrible pollen. The bees need supplemental feeding up there because if they're primarily bringing in safflower pollen, it's like eating nothing but French fries. You're not getting a whole lot of nutrition out of it. But with the wide variety of pollens that we bring in down here, you mix all those pollens up, you pack it in with enzymes and sugar water, boom. You know, you've got bee bread that is highly nutritious because we have such a nice wide range of pollens down here. Most of the time, we don't need to supplement feed.
So
You want me to go? You want me to go back to talking about the banana?
yeah,
I will.
Can you put it right in the root chamber, or can it be conveniently stacked on top of a super?
It can be stacked on top of a super. Yeah, you can put it on whatever your top box is. I have recently adapted all of my feeder shims, which were flat bottom before. I've now put a 1/4 inch shim on them, so I'm not mashing the bananas quite so flat, and so I can get them settled down better. But I take a 1/4 banana, put it on there, mash it onto the top of the frames, put the shim down, settle a little bit, and I'm done. Go back 2 days later, maybe you'll have some peel. That's about it. If you go ahead and peel it and you lay the peel next to the banana, you'll find very little peel left either. And there's more nutrient in the peel than there is in the banana.
But the banana's radioactive because it's so high in potassium.
So my bees glow in the dark. Where's the downside?
It's a coincidence.
I think that a lot of the confusion when you mentioned bees or bananas is my.
Oh, yes, you're quite right. Okay, so methyl acetate, one of the fledgling science of organic chemistry back in 1850, methyl acetate was one of the first chemicals that was artificially manufactured. A wonderful little globule that had a lovely light floral scent to it. It was very stable. Most people back then had never smelled a banana in the United States, you know? So it's like, oh, that's a lovely floral scent. But nobody, hey, that smells like banana. Well, you've never smelled a banana. You don't know what a banana smells like. But later on, of course, everybody's like, hey, that smells like banana. Why do bees go after some perfumes, some soaps, some shampoos, and not others? Because from 1850 to this day, methyl acetate, the artificial chemical, is still a component. If you're trying to come up with a perfume mix, you know, perfume, mix this, mix that, stir the other thing in. I need a light floral note, and oh, methyl acetate was perfect for that. Boom. Well, you're going to be a little too attractive to bees, okay? Because methyl acetate is one of, not the only, but it is one of the components in the attack pheromone. It is actually part of the alert pheromone. Hey, you guys, get ready to come over here and mess this guy up. It is one of the components in the attention or alert pheromone aspect of the attack, okay? It smells like banana. Hey, trust me, I've been stung right here, right? My whole world smelled like banana. As far as I'm concerned, my whole world smelled like banana forever and ever. It was like a day and a half before I wasn't smelling banana everywhere. But the actual chemical that is in bananas, there is a minute bit of methyl acetate in that. All right, but it's not strong enough. Yes, I did the same thing every other new beekeeper did. I stopped eating bananas, which was hard because I eat a banana every morning for breakfast. And I had to stop cold turkey for like 2 years until I started finding out some of this stuff. And I went like, what? Well, tell you what, tomorrow you peel a banana, drop a piece of it in your veil and walk out there. You're not going to attract any extra attention whatsoever. Go ahead and chew that banana, pick up a frame and blow on it. Have the banana tucked in your cheek and blow on it. It's not going to make a reaction. Bananas are fine. But the methyl acetate that you will find in some shampoos, some deodorants, some this, that, or the other thing, it is still a very valuable high light floral note that is used in blends. Not so much as it once was. Somebody, oh, okay. I'm getting pointed to the clock here. You're going to have to let me get through some of this. And then whatever few minutes they're willing to leave us, we'll ask more, we can answer more questions.
The thing about the bananas is, ever since I got into beekeeping, everybody has always told me, bees hate bananas.
And everybody used to tell you the world was flat.
No, I always
okay.
But I think the thing is that you don't want to use banana leaves in your smoke.
I use nothing but banana leaves in my smoker. Banana leaves make one of the best smokes out there. I've done entire videos on it, folks.
A yard full of bananas, and so we don't have to go.
I love to strip. You start from the tip and pull down, and you'll strip the banana leaf off both sides of the main stem. Let that dry out. It is still full of oils. You wad that up, you light it in your smoker. It makes a really cool, really dense smoke. The bees love it. I mean, it's a very, very pleasant smoke.
No embers?
Huh?
No embers?
Really, no. No, it's nothing like using bits of cedar from, the bedding from the store or anything like that. No embers to speak of. Of course, you get down to the very dregs of anything, you can get an ember up. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it lasts forever. And once it's lit, it's a tad, very small tad harder to light, but that's it. And I'll tell you, to get my leaves nice and dry, I made these big chicken wire cages, just a tube of chicken wire. I throw all my leaves in there and just stick them out somewhere so they and get dry. No. Just the other day, Beth, my wife, was saying, why don't we start a company where we produce smoker fuel out of banana leaves? Because we were hearing these people that, oh yeah, we have this special smoker fuel and it's $20 for 3 pounds. And we're like, why don't we just start packaging banana leaves and shipping them around the country? The banana leaves make the absolute best smoker fuel.
I was lied to all these years.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to put that down. We got a lot of questions.
Yeah, I want to mention, I once watched a video of a beekeeper who had made his hive queenless and introduced a new queen, but they rejected her. And he said, I'll just let them make honey for me for the next 6 weeks, and then I'll break them down. He decided just to leave it at that. And I understood, I didn't understand at the time, then later on I understood that it was just a matter that the heavy-duty field force that was in there was going to continue bringing all this in, and as the brood hatched, they could just backfill it with honey. And yeah, he had just written off this hive, but he was going to write it off, and he was going to get like 150 pounds of honey out of it. And that blew my mind. And then I didn't realize for years why it blew my mind, because what he was talking about was there would constantly be a reduction in the number of foragers, or not foragers, of the nurse bees. They'd always be going out to forager force, boom, boom, boom. And if he was down here, everything was going to get overrun with small hive beetles and wax moths. But he was far enough up in the northern tier of states that this was actually a rational thing for him to do up there. So be careful when you're watching all these videos on YouTube, and be careful when you're reading some of these articles and things, that what works up there. On the way here, we were listening to Dr. Jamie Ellis say that they don't really have big problems anywhere that the soil freezes with small hive beetles. The adults can overwinter, but the larvae can't. So they have a huge brood break in the small hive beetles every year that we don't have down here. You can't, techniques you can use, but there are 100 different ways to do a split. And as I was looking at some of those ways in preparation for this, I realized that, a lot of them don't work that well down here. They won't work that well down here. So be aware that beekeeping in South Florida is very different. Boy, we're lucky. Yeah, we are, but at the same time, we don't have a brood break with wax moths or small hive beetles or varroa or anything else. But on the other hand, I recently saw a document showing the prevalence of varroa vectored viruses in different parts of the country and where the hot spots were. And guess what? We weren't in one of the hot spots. Yeah.
He's our speaker next month, Dr. Ellis.
Oh, good. Wonderful. Okay. Is there anything else terribly important here? Oh, yeah. Yeah, remember, since our bees are all going to have some African genetics in them, that's why I was bringing that particular one up, is it's like, but didn't he start getting laying workers all over the place? Well, apparently where he is, his bees are pure enough that laying workers isn't really a thing. Whereas down here, since all of our bees have African genetics in them, and part of those African genetics are like the Cape honeybee, where you can, a worker can become a fully functional queen if the regular queen is removed. I've rarely had a hive go queenless that if I didn't do something about it within 10 days, by 14 days, the workers were laying. So you've either got to start packing it with frames of open brood so that you get the open brood pheromone in there until you can get a new queen in, or something. Or you've just got to scrap the hive, which is what most people say to do. Rather than throw good frames of brood after bad, just scrap the hive, call it quits, recycle everything, and go from there. Hive-reared queen. This is something I just want to mention. Day 1, you split the hive. Day 5 or 6, the queen cell should be built. I always say I check on day 7 to see if I've got queen cells. If I've got queen cells on day 7, I'm gold. I'm fine. Day 12 to 16, the queen emerges and kills rivals. Remember that down here, our bees are anywhere from 1 to 2 days ahead of the curve. 21-day cycle for bees. Yeah, 19 days sometimes down here. Our bees are precocious, I guess you'd say. They're quick learners. I don't know. But day 5 to 6, the queen cells are built. Day 12 to 16, the queen emerges and kills her rivals. Day 19 to 21, the queen does orientation flights and then mating flights, which may be some of the confusion some of the 18th century people observed, that the queen went out on multiple days, which again, recent stuff has confirmed it can happen too, but her orientation flights aren't the same as her mating flights. Day 24 to day 28, egg laying begins. Day 45, your first batch of brood emerges. So from the day you split your hive to the day that you have workers in the hive again is 45 days. A month and a half. 6 weeks, however you want to look at it. So there's no shortcutting that other than we're in South Florida and it's a little bit faster. So, okay, well, good. We're winding it up. To prevent swarming, you can replace all of your queens in the spring or the fall down here in South Florida. Good luck with that. You can provide adequate temperature control in the brood chamber. Screened bottom boards, slatted racks, follower boards, inner covers, or screened inner covers. Now, all that sounds like ventilation, but bees can actually handle ventilation just fine. I don't worry anymore about the bees getting enough air. They are master engineers at that. Relieve congestion in the brood nest, either by equalizing colonies. You can take cap brood from a strong colony and you can put it in a weak colony as long as you're not worried about vectoring any diseases or anything in there. Makes me paranoid. I don't know about you. You can do splits, which is another way to pull, frames of brood out. Just pull them out and put them somewhere else. Okay. Switch locations. You've got a strong hive here, a weak hive here. Switch locations. Give the field force from the strong hive to the weak hive. Or by opening the brood nest and checkerboarding the frame above the brood nest. My favorite, opening the brood nest, checkerboarding the frames above the brood nest in your supers. I love it. It's a simple concept. It's easy to grasp, and it works a treat. It truly does. So I'm going to spin this over. Oops. Yep, there we go. South Florida Beekeeping with Rich on YouTube. Please like and subscribe. And if you want to do me a real favor, watch multiple videos in one sitting. Hit that notification button. I try to have a new video out every Friday. I don't promise that every video is a gem. Sometimes they're filler, but it's usually something interesting one way or the other. Because, again, yes, dear. Questions. Let's go to questions.
So back to that banana. So
Back to the bananas.
you believe that they're eating that banana and feeding it to the brood?
I believe they're eating that banana, and I guess what they're doing with it is packing it in as bee bread, so eventually it's getting fed to the brood, yes.
And what do you notice anything different with the hive beetles? Like if you had a patty, they go like with a patty, but now that you got banana there, are the hive beetles?
The hive beetles have no interest in the banana. Not that I have many hive beetles. Like I say, I've pretty well got that handled. I just did a light inspection of all 3 hives. I saw 2 hive beetles in one hive, 1 in another. And that was it.
I got a quickie. Those little yellow light bulbs you put on your porch, little can-colored moths that go to it, those are wax moths, right?
Some of them could be. The wax moth is a really sleek, very delta-shaped wax moth. Mostly I see them when they're sitting their paws as I'm putting my finger down on them. But there are all kinds of moths. I'm sure that there's a lot of other moths out there that aren't wax moths, certainly seed moths. The problem in my house is seed moths. I have birds. So, you know, I have to keep on top of those too. They don't look like wax moths, but they look similar enough so most people wouldn't know the difference. And why we don't have a pheromone trap for them, I don't know. I've got a pheromone trap for seed moths. It's been a lot of years now, folks. Why haven't we come up with a pheromone trap for wax moths?
Like 100 years, right?
Not quite, but getting on it. 80 years at least, yes.
This is a little off topic, something you said earlier, but in regards to maple trees, you said that we were, or in some areas, still like what, a 9A, but our temperature globally has increased in most of the areas like 10A, 10B, 11.
9A is Jacksonville.
Okay. So, but I guess my question is, has our zoning, our agricultural zoning increased with the global
Yes.
warming?
Okay, again, as I said, I'm an ISA certified arborist. I also have a degree in forestry, but I was also a city employee. And I'm also a state of Florida certified landscape inspector. What that all means is that once or twice a month, for many, many years, the city would send me over to the IFAS building, the extension service, and we would listen to programs. Well, one day the people who do the zone maps came over there. It was about 5 years ago, I guess, just before I retired. And they were telling us they were updating the zone maps. It used to be Zone 11 was the Dade County line. They were moving Zone 11 officially to Griffin Road. Okay? And they admitted that they could just as easily have made it another 10 or 15 miles north, but it was kind of politics. You know, they didn't want to be that dramatic, but they told us then that within 5 years, they only update these maps every 10 years. They told us that within 5 years, and that was 5 years or 6 years ago, that all of all of Broward County would actually be Zone 11.
South.
And south.
Zone 11, Zone 11.
Yeah, well, there's no 10B. I was in, when I moved into the house I'm in 30 years ago, I was solidly in Zone 10B. And I mean, I could not grow certain types of palms because I was in 10B, not 10A. All right, I can't even think of Pindo palm. There's Pindo palms that thrive and do beautifully in Zone 10A, but in Zone 10B, they fail. And I thought to myself, what? 10A of 441. Come on. I bought the palm at a nursery just on the other side of 441, brought it out, planted it at the house. Everything was perfect with it. After the first winter, it died. It was like, I'll be darned. But that was 30 years ago when there was still such a thing as 10A and 10B in Broward County. Now it's all 11.
So why do we hear it also zone 12?
No, because zone 12 is like almost, the middle of Mexico. It's just zone 11 is really big and we're at the north end of it. And it's moving further north. But for the other end of it, it's going to, we're talking 60 miles right now. It was 60.6 miles from my house to here. And it was almost a straight shot. There was hardly any side road at all. 60 miles from my house to here. We're talking about the other end of zone 11 is 250 miles that away.
So what is it where we're at right now?
You're in zone 11.
Zone 11.
You're very solidly in zone 11. No possibility of frost.
Yeah, but we got snow in 77.
I was throwing snowballs in 77.
That's Key West, zone 12.
No, it's still zone 11.
It's closer to the Tropical Cancer, and it never got no snow.
It's still in zone 11. It isn't to zone 12 yet. They're not that small. It looked that small when you're looking at the map up in the central part of the country because it goes boom, 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 boom so much. But that's because it's in the north end. The more into the tropics you get, the wider those zones get. And then when you get to the extreme southern edge of South America, it starts doing the boom, boom, boom thing as you get in colder and colder and colder at the southern edge of South America. Okay, next question. Yeah, well, it's we're in 11 and it's not going to change anytime soon. My wife's telling me to cut it off if we're all done. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Now, I'm going to do it anyway. Okay, in fact, that's been Rich, South Florida Beekeeping with Rich. Be sure to like and subscribe.